The number of college closures across the U.S. are expected to rise. That's according to new data from the Philadelphia Fed. They're citing a slowdown in prospective students. And the findings are the subject of this week's Muni Moment. Joining us right now is Bloomberg's Nic Querolo, who covers Muni finance for us here at Bloomberg World Headquarters. And Nick, we've heard about a lot of the pain at some of these colleges. Give us a sense of the scale of these potential closures.
Sure. So this paper was really interesting to us because until this research, it was generally thought to be pretty hard to predict school closures. Their finances are very different case by case, but using machine learning and some algorithms, they predicted that kind of in a worst case scenario if we saw this demographic cliff, this idea that there's fewer students kind of applying to colleges. The researchers modeled for a 15% drop in students, which could be as severe as affecting over 100,000 students and 20,000 staff.
And walk us through the economic impact of that as well, especially on smaller towns where many of these schools are often located.
Sure. So a lot of times a college, they're known as what are called anchor institutions, like a hospital. Sometimes they're the biggest employer for miles in particularly rural parts of the United States. And the higher ed industry is just a massive generator of economic activity in the U.S. I think they employ upwards of 3 million people, and it generates, billions of dollars of economic activity. And even, this was the worst case scenario that they modeled, but even on a smaller scale, that could really funnel some pockets of distress into particular parts of the country.
It was kind of interesting when you look at where the closure rates are and some of the data that you have listed in your story, some of the for-profit colleges, obviously one of the higher levels there. I am curious, is there a distinction between, and I don't want to say one college is better than the others, but there's a difference obviously between a Harvard and a DeVry, for example. Where are we seeing more closures? Is it in that more for-profit space where maybe the ROI for those students isn't as high as it would be for, say, an Ivy League school?
Yeah, experts talk about this kind of barbell shape in the higher ed space. So the strongest, the schools with a lot of name recognition, and they're drawing students from all over the world. I mean, Princeton and schools in the Ivy League are selling 100-year bonds. They're feeling pretty confident and stable. But on the other end, you see these types of schools with maybe less name recognition, and like the researchers point out, I think there's been maybe 1,600 schools that have closed over the last 2 decades. The vast majority of those are in for-profit. I think about 7% of the closures are kind of in your, what many people think of as your traditional liberal arts kind of private school.
Yeah.
So Nick, what does this mean for the muni market? Colleges have been among some of the most aggressive borrowers these last couple of years. Is there sufficient demand for their debt? And they want to be issuing debt if they want to try to survive.
It's interesting. So there is obviously a lot of demand for high yield paper in the muni market. Investors are very interested in trying to lock in some higher rates. But at the same time, there has been a kind of chilling effect on some investors as they're looking to invest in higher ed. We're talking to portfolio managers. In some cases, they're telling us they're steering clear of the small college asset class entirely. And this is kind of just a new dynamic that's evolved in the market. I think for a long time, most munis in the higher ed space were considered pretty safe investments.
All right, Nic Querolo, a great story. Check it out on the Bloomberg terminal. A closer look here at the potential closures of several colleges and the potential economic impact. New data out from the Feds.